God told you that a pastor that you were not dating, that you didn't know, he was to be your husband.
Yes. He came to visit my church in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I believe that this gentleman was my husband.
He had come to the church one week. You drive from Charlotte to Nashville.
Charlotte to Nashville.
Yeah. All within 1 week.
Yes.
No job.
No job.
You said you were eating mustard.
I had mustard for dinner one time.
You go to the church and start serving.
He's an amazing preacher.
I mean, because I figured out.
People
Most
they put his name,
yeah.
church, and all those things. He's like, what are you doing here? And I told him I moved there. At the time, he said he was seeing someone else. I still believe what I believed. I wasn't tripping on the fact that he and I weren't talking. Because I'm like, God's going to do it. I'm believing God.
This was an 8-year
This was an 8-year thing.
You really weren't in a relationship with this man.
Everything was fine. Things didn't get crazy until he introduced his now wife to the church. And I knew.
Because you felt like she was really living your life.
She was. In my head.
During this period, this 8 years, 33 to 41, now relationships have become your purpose. What has kind of given you that authority to speak to relationships? What would you say to women who find themselves in a situation where the thing that they want doesn't want them back? At what point did you stop blaming God and then start to examine the part that you played? Welcome to Vaughn Empowers Talks, where we don't just scratch the surface. We dive deep into the lives of some of the world's most influential change makers. I'm your host, Brandi Harvey. But before I introduce my guest for today, I need you to go ahead and do me a favor. I need you to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss your daily dose of inspiration and motivation. But without further ado, I get to introduce this beautiful woman seated across from me. Chanel Nicole Scott is the creator, executive producer, and host of CheMinistry and Relationship Matters, a relationship platform and talk show that airs on the Fox Soul Network. Notably, the queen of relationship talk, Chanel evokes transparent and candid dialogue on relational topics specifically geared towards sustaining intimate relationships between a man and a woman. As the author of Relationship Matters, Chanel delves into the intricacies of love and partnerships with unbridled transparency, drawing from her own experiences, guiding readers towards fulfilling connection. Chanel has been featured in Black Enterprise, Fox Soul, and Rolling Out Magazine, just to name a few. Chanel believes your presence is a reminder that healing is possible, even after the deepest wounds. Vaughn Empowers Talks welcome author, producer, and media host Chanel Nicole Scott to the show.
Thank you for having me. Now, you really did do your homework.
I really did.
You got my quotes and everything that I've ever said. I said it. I said that. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
a pleasure.
Yes.
So I am so excited to talk about relationships with you. You have lived a very unconventional life by many standards.
I would say that.
But I was really intrigued in getting to know you and diving into your story when you sat on Latarius R. Whitfield's platform, the Dear Future Wifey. And Latarius is a friend of the show.
Yes.
He's done the show. He and I have become friends. And that was such an eye-opening interview that you did.
I believe that this gentleman who was a pastor was my husband, and he was not. I was in the word. I was manipulating God's word to fit my own agenda. I mean, you could not tell me that he was not. That is a story that I do want to bring light to, because there are a lot of women who have those experiences, but they don't have the courage to come forward and talk about it. Most times when we go through those types of situations, we go to the church for support. But if you're experiencing that in the church, then who supports you? Who do you go to? You have to deal with it in silence.
Ooh, Chanel. Now, we just going to get into it.
Yes, let's get into it.
So you were on the Dear Future Wifey podcast, and you said that you were in that God told you that a pastor that you were not dating at the time.
I didn't know.
That you didn't know, you were only familiar with,
Yes.
that he was to be your husband.
Yes.
Yes. And I know that you're not the only woman, because there's a lot of y'all sitting out here in these pews on Sunday, and you are looking at the man that's your husband.
Thinking that he was a single man. I want to put that out there. At the time, it was so many women that believed that man was their husband.
Are you hearing them saying that?
Yeah, I met a few. I sat next to one lady in the congregation. She was like, God just led me here. He came to visit my church in Charlotte, North Carolina, and like I stated, he was an amazing orator, prolific pastor, anointed man of God. And Amazing word. No, seriously.
He is. I mean, because I figured out when you was talking.
I know,
figured
and
out.
most people did. They put his name,
yeah.
church, and all those
Yeah.
things, even add their little commentary to it.
Yeah.
And I believe that this gentleman was my husband. I did attempted to have I bought a book from him. He had books. He's an author and did a book signing there at the church. And he could have just been making small talk. I'm not saying that there was any motive behind what he said, but in that moment, attempted to have a conversation. I was extremely intimidated, and so that did not happen. And so after a conversation with me and my girlfriend at the time, we decided to go to Nashville and visit the church.
So y'all did a road trip, and he had come to the church one week, and but you had made connection because you had a connection with his assistant.
Yes.
The assistant knew that you and your friend were going to be visiting the church.
So this is what happened. I'd never met the assistant, but I knew who he was because he was there with him. So I found him on the website and I sent him an email and said, hey, we're going to come visit the church, not this Sunday, but the next Sunday. But between the time I sent the email and just some things that transpired, we decided we were going to go that weekend and not the weekend that we initially had said. So we drove to Nashville. I sent the email. He didn't respond, didn't get a response. We drove to Nashville. We went to church. And at the church, we ran into the assistant first because this is when they would stand in front of the church and greet the members at the worship service. And when we saw the assistant, he was like, I thought you guys were going to come next weekend. And I was like, you know who I am? And then I explained, I played it off real natural and was like, no, we have some things to do at our church next Sunday. So we decided to come this Sunday. And so that was kind of the gist of the conversation between myself and the assistant. We went up to the pastor, we shook hands, and that was the end of it. We went outside, sat in the car. By now I'm like, oh my God, we've driven 6 hours and that's what it's going to be. And
because you drive from Charlotte to Nashville. Yeah.
And so we're sitting, because it's a large church, we're sitting in traffic waiting to get out. And at this time I get a call, a call on from a private number, and I answer the call, and it's the pastor. And he essentially was like, I thought you guys was coming, same conversation. I thought you guys was coming next Sunday. And we explained, we came this Sunday and, and so he said he was going to dinner. They had prepared dinner because at this time he was a single man.
Because he had lost his wife. He was widowed.
Yes, he was widowed. And he said that he would give us a call when he got done with dinner or, his plans. And so she and I, we went and we had dinner. And she and I had this conversation. She was like, well, where are we going to meet him at? Because I know we're not going to his home. And I said, I don't know, girl, because we had checked out of our hotel.
Yeah. And
so when he called, he said, typically at the Sunday service, I like to relax. I hope y'all didn't come for any, he said his name, Bishop Revelations. And at the time, I wasn't really familiar with him in the term, in that, because he's great at, he's an amazing preacher in that.
Yeah.
You get some serious revelation. He is anointed in that way. He walks in the gift of prophecy for sure. And I'm like, okay, well, we just came to, kick it. It's nothing serious. And so he was like, well, here's the address to my home. And I looked at her and I said, oh my God.
In your mind, you like, this is a sign from God.
I didn't know at that time it wasn't like that.
So you weren't thinking that this was your husband then?
No, I did. I was more interested in seeing if he knew. Because like I said, we had the little words. Did he see something when he was at my church a couple days before? And obviously they had a conversation because the assistant knew who I was.
Okay, so just for clarity, he comes to your church the week before.
Yes.
So this is all within 1 week.
Yes.
You were at this man's church and then going to his house after you all met.
I was at my church in Charlotte Monday, Tuesday. We went to his church on Sunday and went to his house on Sunday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. You are committed.
Well, he invited. He invited us. We were kind of like, well, where are we going to meet? Because I'm in Nashville. That's not my home, and so it was his idea for us to come to his home, and so we did.
I love how you said he comes outside. He's not in his suit. So he does not even look like how you have really, had this marker of how he looks.
Yeah, because he was bishop to me.
Yeah.
And so when he came to the door, he had on a polo shirt and shorts. I'll never forget it. And I was like, I was nervous. So it wasn't like, It wasn't on some weird stuff. Like, okay, yeah, we have these thoughts, I believe this, but this is not something that I wear on my sleeve. This is not something I'm going to announce to the world.
Yeah, you didn't tell him.
Yeah, I didn't tell him.
You were very demure, very mindful.
Yeah, very. Because I was nervous.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm 33. I mean, and I speak very highly of him now. I stick to the facts in terms of what happened, but I have respect. I have respect today. But I was extremely nervous and I didn't know what we were about to walk into. But I wanted to see, if he was thinking what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And so we went and we played games, we watched movies, he played the piano, we played blackjack, we played truth or dare. We did a little bit of everything and it got late. And so he offered us to stay, and so we chose to stay.
And I can understand, at least you had a semblance of a relationship, an encounter with the guy. Yeah. Y'all talked, y'all did that. He brought you to his house. That's very intimate for somebody to bring you to their home. At least that's what it means to me. Where'd your body lay down?
We shared the bed.
Who is we?
The pastor.
Okay.
He was not inappropriate. It was more like a slumber party. I was like, I need to take a shower. But he came in after I got out and I had the towel. I think in that moment he checked himself. Like, let me get out of here.
One of the things that you said in your interview was that you were attracted to his anointing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that was intimidating for you in some ways.
Very intimidating.
Yeah.
Yes, like I said, he was a powerful, I grew up in church and I'm a student of the word. And so that was attractive to me, to see him operate in that space. And I can say that today and I can articulate it clearly today because I can reflect back and say, okay, what was going through your mind? Like, what was it that drew you to this man? You know what I'm saying? Because clearly he's not my person. I'm not attracted to him today. It's different. I have so much respect for him as a pastor, but it's not a romantic attraction. But back then, as a 33-year-old woman, single, never married, no children, had experienced a certain level of success at that time in my life. Everybody's getting married around me. I want to be in a relationship. And so when I think about who would that person be or what would that person embody? Now, I'm not going into church with this on my mind, but when I'm watching him and then with the little flirtation as he's walking by me in the foyer of the church after service, all those little things, I'm like, could this man be my husband? Because I knew he was single. You know what I'm saying? I knew his wife had passed.
Yeah.
So we went and I wanted to explore this whole idea, but I didn't want him to know that I thought that, I didn't, aside from just going there, I didn't do anything outside of myself that would be considered strange. I just wanted to see and explore. And he opened the door for that. All I had to do was show up. Yeah. And so in hindsight, obviously, I think he thought maybe I was an attractive woman, but after we spent the one time together and maybe talked on the phone once or twice after that, he decided that this is not my person, and then it was a wrap from there.
You said that it was hard for you to have a real intelligent conversation with him because there was an intimidation. You said there was one time that he called and he was sharing good news.
Yeah, so when I told this story on Laterra, it's like now that I did his show, I can recall the intricate details.
Yeah.
So that particular call, he had done TBN, and Jamal Bryant was on TBN, and I guess after the show, did the show with him. He was so excited, and he called me up. I guess he wanted to talk to somebody about what had just happened. And when he's talking to me about it, I couldn't engage him. I was just stuck. It's like couldn't talk because I was so enamored, by this man, so impressed that I just couldn't formulate my words. And so I guess he didn't get what he needed out of that conversation. And we wasn't on the phone no more than maybe 15 minutes. And it ended. Yeah.
And was that after that, did you all really have conversation?
We talked maybe once or twice. I mean, because he's a friendly guy. He would send the devotionals, but I think after the one or two times, it was like, no,
But this was an 8-year.
This was an 8-year thing. Absolutely.
Chanel.
So
33 to 41.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So after that, I started to follow him on Streaming Faith.
Okay.
And that's a, online platform for ministry. And the word was so poignant. I'm like, God is talking to me. He's telling me. And I had told some of my friends I'm moving to Nashville, but it wasn't I was serious, but not really, if that makes sense. I'm talking about it, but I'm not sure how this thing is going to manifest or transpire. So I'm like, I'm going to Nashville. And so maybe about 3 or 4 months after our initial meeting, I got fired from my job. It was such an unusual situation because we had a way of doing things, and then they was like, okay, we're not doing things like this. But if you do it, you're gonna get a first final written warning. So I did it like maybe 2 weeks after we weren't supposed to do it, got on the first final written warning, and it was cool, whatever. And then the second time it happened, they did an audit maybe 3 months after the initial time and saw that I had did it one more time afterwards. And so they called me in the office and they want to have this conversation. Now, during this 3-month period, I had seen people being walked out for this same offense. So I'm like, oh my goodness. And so prior to me getting to work that day, my cousin called and was like, Chanel, when you go into work, I don't want you to be afraid. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I guess in her prayer time, she saw this whole occurrence because when I got there, I wasn't there 30 minutes, and they did call me in the office and they let me know what happened, and they said they needed to discuss it. They didn't walk me out, so I was able to go back to work. And so as the day progressed, I noticed I wasn't getting any more. I was a claims adjuster. I wasn't getting any more claims. And so I went to my manager and I'm like, hey, is today my last day? And he almost choked on his soda because I guess they didn't want me to know. And he was like, well, we were just going to let you finish out the day. I said, okay, no problem. And so I did an exit interview. And in the exit interview, the director said, I hear you're going to Nashville. So I don't know where she got that from. I had shared with my peers, but not the director of the company.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I'm like, wow, I guess I'm going to Nashville. And so I was out of work maybe 2 weeks before I moved to Nashville. At the time, I didn't have the money to make the move. I never forget it. I was on the phone with my sister, and I had made steps to getting a place. I had already secured an apartment.
But you were a homeowner in Charlotte.
I was a homeowner in Charlotte.
Yeah.
Had my home.
Yeah.
And I hired a broker who brought renters in. And I was doing all of this at the same time. Like, my house was still my house when I left, but I wanted to go, because I didn't have a job. So it was like, okay, what are you going to do now? You need to get somewhere and get situated so you can find another job. And so that's why I moved so quickly. And so within 2 weeks, I made the decision that I was going to Nashville. I secured the apartment. I was on the phone with my sister. I'm like, I got the apartment, but I don't have the money. And as I'm telling her this, I'm checking my mailbox. And I opened my mailbox, and there's a check for what I needed. It was a refund check because I was in school at the time getting my master's degree. And so I said, do you believe I got the money to make this move? And so I made the move. I had some of my church members come pack my car. What couldn't fit in the car didn't go.
So all this time you were thinking, like, the stars are aligning.
Yes.
This is all working together for my good.
Yes.
I am supposed to do this in this season of my life.
Yes.
You're 33 years old
33.
at the time. You then moved to Nashville. A couple, this is like
2 weeks after I lost my job.
2 weeks after you lose your job, you moved to Nashville.
Yes.
No job.
No job.
No income.
No income.
And you go to the church and start serving. And so I want you to really tell this story, because I think that there are so many women who are seated in many churches across this nation, and they have this thought that, well, maybe this is my husband, or maybe this is the space that I'm supposed to be here and set up shop, and this is going to be my life. I want you to kind of walk through what was going through your mind.
So I have to say this. While he was not my husband, God definitely led me there, because everything that I do today, I learned in that ministry.
Absolutely.
My CheMinistry, because he had something similar, but in church, whereas mine is, more secular. I learned that. I told you I was in school getting my master's degree, and I was serving on the marketing team. And so just having that exposure to that level of ministry, that's what prepared me to do the things that I did. But at the time, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I was praying for a husband. I didn't know. This is the thing. Purpose, destiny, vision, those were all cliche words to me back then. Now, we talk about that today. You see it on social media, but we didn't have social media back then. Right? So that I'm just going, because I'm like, God, I'm asking for a husband. This is what I'm asking you for. But he was like, if you want a husband, you got to get in purpose first. You got to serve me first. I didn't understand that, though. I was just doing what I thought I should do. Now, I had a passion to do marketing. I was in school for it. And so I did it for the ministry, but I didn't understand that as being purpose at the time. I just thought I was being put in position. I didn't believe that I believe God to bring this thing together. Like, I never stalked him or did anything inappropriate. That's not my style. I don't do that.
Yeah.
But I just put myself in position thinking that the situation would, God would create a situation
where he'll see you.
where he'll see me and we'll connect. And so I moved down there. I didn't tell him I was moving down there. I actually didn't call him until I attended church service that Sunday. I got there on a Saturday and I went to church on Sunday. And then at the church, I did reach out. And, he asked me, I told him I moved there. He's like, what are you doing here? And I told him I moved there. And he was like, do you have a job? And I'm like, no. He was like, you don't have a job? I'm like, no, I'm working on it. And so at the time he said he was seeing someone else. And that was essentially it. It was a very short conversation.
Okay, so when he tells you, because in your mind, you're still thinking that this is your husband. So when he tells you he's seeing somebody else, what does it trigger for you?
I still believe what I believed. I knew it was not something that I could do in my own strength and power. And I was just going to serve. I believe that if I served my way, God would create or open that door for me in his time. I didn't try to do something to make it happen or be weird about it. It's not something that I was proud of. It was definitely a private struggle, something that I was struggling with and trying to come to terms with. And there were a few times where I entertained the idea that I miss God. But the thought of that, the pain of it.
What do you mean when you say you miss God?
Maybe this isn't who I believed him to be. But the thought of missing God was too painful to entertain, because you got to think, I've moved, I've left my home.
Yeah,
I've left my church, my family, my friends, and I'm in a whole new city, right? And just getting set up was the easy part. I got to Nashville and I kept getting this form email from the Human Resources Department at the company that I worked for prior to, not the claims, but prior. I was with AT&T for 3 years. Bell South turned to AT&T. And I kept getting this email about my old position. So I'm like, they keep sending me this email. Let me call Human Resources and let them know I'm in Nashville. I'm no longer in Charlotte. And so I did. And I knew the lady in Human Resources. And I was like, hey, I said, I keep getting this email about this role. I said, but I'm in Nashville. She said, we have some positions available. When they called me back, they didn't want to interview me. They just said, we want to do a drug test. They did the drug test. I got the job. They started me at my same rate of pay. And I was sad.
Yeah.
When I showed up at the company, they didn't know who I was. Nobody had interviewed me, but I had a job. So those things, it just happened.
Yeah.
So I didn't struggle at the beginning when I got there. I got situated, I got a job. And in the meantime, until my job started, because it was around I got there in October, so it was around the holidays when all this stuff started to transition. So I didn't start my job until January. I worked for UPS because I'm a hustler. I do whatever it takes to make it happen. So I didn't have a hard time with that transition. Things were fairly smooth. Like, I wasn't tripping on the fact that he and I weren't talking. Because I'm like, God's going to do it. I'm believing God. And so that's what my mindset was. I went there, I made friends, I served in ministry, and everything was fine. Things didn't get crazy until he introduced his now wife to the church.
Okay, so then when that happened, what did that do for you in your mind and in your spirit?
It was devastating.
Yeah.
It was devastating. Like, I can't articulate the pain that I felt in that moment, the confusion, the frustration, the whole idea of I came to a new city, gave up my life in Charlotte, and I blame God for it. Like, God, why did you allow this to happen to me?
Wow.
And so I went through all those emotions, but I still believed. It didn't matter. Like, on the one hand, you got the confusion, the frustration, but on the other hand, I still believe, because isn't this what we're taught? So we're taught to walk by faith and not by sight.
Now, Chanel. Now, most people who read the Bible, there is a passage in there that says, he that findeth a wife.
Absolutely.
Findeth a good thing,
right,
and gets favor with the Lord. I might be,
No, that's right.
Okay. So in your mind, were you thinking like, he's going to find me in this situation? Or
in my mind, I put myself in position. Like I said, I wasn't calling him. I wasn't, I wasn't putting myself in his space per se, because church is large.
So he never knew that you even really were interested in him.
Well, I mean, because remember, I spent the night at his house.
Right. You spent the night. But y'all didn't have sex.
No, we kissed.
You kissed.
On a truth or dare challenge.
Yeah.
And he asked me, like, one of the questions he asked me that night at his house was, he was like, what's one of the things that you guys talked about on your way here? And so I'm looking at him like, and so I said, I just was, interested in getting to know you. That's what I said.
Okay.
So I never said this is what I believe, because I was still kind of like, I believed it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I responded to him. But absolutely, I believe that scripture. So I wasn't actively pursuing him, but I did put myself in position for sure.
I mean, you uprooted your life.
I did.
Yeah. So when was it how long were you there that he introduced his current wife?
Just shy of a year.
So you were there a year, and then he introduces her one day at church, and you're like totally blindsided by this?
Well, prior to him introducing her, because I served on the marketing team, they used to make jokes like Bishop got a girlfriend. And so I would just be listening. Like, I didn't entertain the conversation, but I'm listening. I'm like, no, in my mind, no, he don't. This is my mind. No, he don't have a girlfriend. But they would talk about it and chat, and I'm just listening. And because I guess she had started to come visit, because she didn't live in Nashville. She lived somewhere else. And so they would talk about it, and I would just listen. And so he didn't, because she didn't live there, she wasn't at church, every Sunday.
Yeah.
But then she started coming to church, and then he announced it, that this was someone special, and went through her whole, she's an extraordinary person. She went here in terms of her education, her pedigree. And then that's how it happened. And the weird thing about that is, when he made this announcement, there was a lady sitting in front of me. This lady turned around and looked at me and said, "She looks like you." I said, "What?" This is what she said, just out the blue. The lady turns around and says, now this lady don't know what I'm believing.
Yeah.
She just turns around because I'm there every Sunday. I got my little suit on. And I'm 6'1" with no shoes on.
I mean, yeah,
so people
you are
know I'm in the room.
Glamazon.
Yeah, they
yes,
know I'm in the room.
Yeah.
So she looked at me and said, "She looks like you." And I said, "Wow, God, this is crazy." So yeah, that's what happened.
I mean, during this time of this 8 years, because she's introduced a year after you've been to church, but you stay committed to the ministry and serving in this ministry for a number of years.
Because in that moment, my thought process was this: I'm not here. Like, I believe that this man is my husband, but God, I'm here for you. I'm like, so regardless of whether you do it or not, I'm not here for a man. Right? The thing that hurt me, I think, more than anything, it wasn't about a man. It was about, I uprooted my whole life.
Yeah.
I lost all these things, so, and then that situation happened. So all of that put together just made for a disaster. And so I wanted to prove to God that I'm not here for him. Like, if you don't do it, I'm still here for you. I'm still committed to serving you. And so I stayed.
So where was the shift that happened? Because in the interview, you talked about, when you shared the story, that, things had gotten really bad for you financially. Really you ended up losing your place to live and your car.
Well, what happened was my lease, so he married her.
Yeah.
Okay? And so after he married her, a few months after, I lost my job. And then my lease expired on my apartment, so I left. And I went home to Jersey. And I stayed there for 3 months, but I'm like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. Like, I hadn't been here since before college.
Yeah.
So I knew that wasn't home for me. And so I had mentored some young girls prior to leaving. I'm like, hey, can I come crash with you for 2 weeks? Because I don't know. I used to be a flight attendant many, many, many years ago, so I know how to navigate and move in different spaces. So I knew if I just get back down there, get back to work, everything would be fine. But when I got back down there, I felt like God was saying, I want you to serve in this season. So I didn't go right back to work. So what was supposed to be a 2-week stay ended up being a 15-month stay.
And you were living in your mentee's dorm.
Well, I was initially, I stayed with her for a couple of weeks, but then in the RA, I don't know what you call the director of the RAs, but so Nashville is, it's a decent sized city, but everybody goes to this church.
Yeah.
And so because they knew, I went to this church, I serve in ministry, the lady who was over the RAs, she gave the okay for me to stay there a couple of weeks. Well, there was a certain scenario that didn't involve me where another student tried to, throw this lady under the bus. And so they said I had to leave. And so I left from her place and they put me in an apartment on the campus.
Wow.
So I wasn't with her, but I was, they were responsible. Like they were moving me around. They was navigating, they was creating space. If there was like an empty room, they would allow me to stay in that space.
I mean, this is happening when you're in your late 30s at this point.
At this point, it was 2010. So, yeah. So, how is that? 2010. I was 33. So, this was what? 30, 36.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At what point did you stop blaming God and then start to examine the part that you played into?
I didn't stop blaming God for a while. It was some years. So, at the time, like this is the thing, and even today, I'm a radical Christian. Like I'm going to take the risk. If anybody's going to take the risk, if anybody's going to take the gamble, it's going to be me. And so I was willing to go through, what I needed to go through. I was like, Lord, if this is what I got to go through to get what I want, then I'm willing to do just that. And so that was my mindset, right? So a lot of what I went through, while it was hurtful, it was painful, I was willing to endure it because that's just how bad I wanted it. And it wasn't so much centered on this man, more so than it was on the idea of just wanting to be married.
You said you had an unhealthy...
It was an unbridled desire to be married.
To have a husband.
Have a husband. And it just wasn't directed towards him. He just happened to be the object of my affection at that time. But I just had a desire to be married. All my friends had gotten married or either had children, and I had neither. And so I really wanted this. And I really believed it. And the thing about it is, because I was in the Word, God was speaking, but he wasn't speaking to that. He was speaking, but it wasn't to that. It wasn't to that. And I mean, I can admit that he was speaking because I was serving and, achieving a certain level of success, even in ministry, looking like hell. We had a magazine there, and I had just got my MBA, and I went out into the community, and I raised about $30,000 for the church, and selling the magazine ads. I wrote for the magazine. I edited for the magazine. And so these are all the things that I do for my own business today. But he was speaking, he was preparing me for purpose. It just wasn't for this man. And that's where I got it mixed up. So after I came back and I was serving, well, things got bad because I didn't have an income. So I lost my car, after a couple months of being there. I couldn't afford to take care of myself. I couldn't afford to eat. I mean, I was looking like death.
You said you were eating mustard.
I had mustard for dinner one time. Yeah, for sure. I had mustard. We didn't have food. This young lady, she struggled with me, and she shouldn't have had to do that.
Shout out to Jasmine.
Yeah, everybody shout out to Jasmine. Yeah, Jasmine, she was a trooper. I had mentored the girls prior to me going through what I went through, and I would take them out to eat and teach them etiquette, and we would talk about different things. And so they really looked up to me, but I was not a mentor, and I'd be the first one to say I was not a mentor to her in that moment, but she stuck beside me. She really did. Mm-hmm.
So I want you to speak to the women who are listening to this and they have found themselves in a similar situation where maybe it's not a church, but maybe it's somewhere else that they place themselves because they thought they heard God push them in that direction. What would you say to women who find themselves in a situation where the thing that they want doesn't want them back?
Right. So first of all, God is very strategic. There was no indicator. Like there was nothing happening that indicated that this man was my husband. So we got to be practical. First of all, he's very practical. He's not mystical like people try to make him to be. When I did get my life in alignment and I started following his direction and what he wanted me to do, like I know both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So I know what it is to miss God and manipulate the word, but I also know what it is to hear God.
Yeah.
And and be in purpose and do all those things. He's very strategic and very purposeful. Everything that I was doing was directed toward purpose. Nothing I was doing was directed towards this man.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. There was no indicator that this is who I believed him to be. Now, at the time, I couldn't allow myself to believe it, but you got to have a real grown-up talk with yourself, right? You just got to be honest with yourself. Like I said, there were times where I entertained the idea that maybe I missed God, but I was like, no, I wouldn't allow myself to even entertain that thought because of everything that I had lost. It was just... It was an overwhelming feeling. It was overpowering. It was definitely it affected, because of the loss, it affected everything that I knew about myself, my identity. Like all of a sudden, I don't know who I am anymore. I'm doing these things, trying to figure it out. It affected my mental in a major way. I'll be the first one to say, like, I was like, no. And then I'm just persistent by nature. Like, I'm a hustler. I'm going to make it happen by any means necessary. So that didn't serve me well. Those characteristics and my personality, they served me well now in business, but in that situation, it didn't, because I was trying to make something or force something to be that wasn't. So we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with
What was
ourselves.
the first thing you told yourself to get out of that slump? What was the first thing you said to yourself?
I got sick and tired of being in that situation. So this was a span of 8 years.
Yeah.
It started 2007. It finally came. I would say it started so his daughter was born in 2012, but things started to transition for me in 2014 because I was forced to go home because I couldn't take care of myself. And so being in that situation, my mom, I love my mom. I know she loves me, but she was like, you got to get it together. Like,
your parents, both your parents lived with you.
Yeah, so they
to help you get back on your feet.
So my parents have been divorced probably more than 40 years now. But at that particular time, my mother had relocated to North Carolina, and I asked my dad to come and live with us because my mom was very hard on me, and rightfully so. And so I wanted him to come and buffer some of that. And I don't want to hurt, because I did Latera's interview, and that really hurt my mom, so I want to speak properly. She was tough. Now I know she loved me, and she took care of me. She was the one who made sure I had food, made sure I had, clothes on my back and shoes on my feet, but she was tough. Like, you can't, that was the truth. You can't change it. She was extremely tough. She didn't understand what I was going through. She wasn't really interested in understanding. All she knew was that I needed to get out of that slump and get back to being the ambitious person, the go-getter that I was, because that situation really had me stuck in a life's mess. Like, I didn't have the mental capacity to do anything. It wasn't an issue of finding a job. I was mentally stuck, not knowing what's my next move, like what next. I didn't have a what next. My only what next was how I'm getting back to Nashville.
You wanted to put yourself back in this situation, to go back into the city of Nashville, even though that was a place that really caused
Extreme
a great deal of trauma.
Absolutely.
You said that you tried therapy at one point.
The therapy was later on. I didn't have therapy at that time. That wasn't even a thing. That was like some years later after I moved to Atlanta. I tried the therapy. But during that time, what really got me out of that was the word. Like, that was my anchor. I'd never forget, my mom was like,
so the thing that got you into it was the thing that got you out of it.
Yes, because that was the only thing that gave me hope. Because still the word, it speaks hope. Even if you get your signals crossed, there's still hope in that, right? And so I believed, and that's what gave me the strength to finally get up out of that situation. I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired. I wasn't working. I started one of my businesses at the time, but I was in a small town because my dad is from North Carolina, mom's from Jersey. She moved to North Carolina. Dad and mom moved into a home with me together. So we were all operating like roommates. Dad was supporting me, but now it's like, what am I going to do here? The town is too small for me. I've outgrown this town. I went to high school there. It's my hometown. So I think after a while, I just because I'm I'm a go-getter. And so I sat for 3 years in North Carolina, just trying to figure it out. Mama was like, you obsessed. Like, I would be in the word all the time. She said, you're obsessed. And I'm like, no, this is the only thing that I have left. Like, literally, I lost everything. I lost the home that I had in North Carolina. Even my clothes I left with Jasmine. I had come home to Jersey for 2 weeks for a wedding. And when I came home, that's when I decided you're not supposed to go back there. Because I came home with 2 weeks worth of clothing, and I had already, lost a car, didn't have work, but I just came home for my uncle's wedding. And I decided not to go back. And I brought 2 weeks worth of clothing, and I left everything else that I had with Jasmine. Jasmine kept that stuff for 4 years before I was able to get the rest of my belongings. And when I did go and get those things from her, I took them straight to Goodwill.
So, Chanel, I'm so curious as to, during this period, this 8 years, 33 to 41, and then you find yourself in this healing space, and now relationships have become your purpose. And so what has kind of given you that authority to speak to relationships when so much damage has been caused, in...
So CheMinistry is a place where we have transparent, candid conversations about relational issues. Because I went through that in church, I didn't have a platform to speak, right? For fear of being put out the church. So the moment I was able to create my own platform, I know there are other people who have had similar experiences as I have. I wanted to create a space where we could talk about it. I'm a conversationalist. I don't tag, other people tag me as an expert. I don't do that. I like to have the conversation because I know that other people are going through these experiences. And a lot of times when you experience relationship trauma, it's like juicy when you first hear about it. You want to hear it. But then once you hear it, you're like, okay, get over it. Move on. And it's not that easy. I was in it for 8 years. And so I created a space where people like me could come and have these transparent, candid conversations about whatever issue they were having. And we could talk about it as long as you want to until you arrive at a place of peace.
Okay, so what was the hard conversation you had to have with yourself? Because 8 years, you really weren't in a relationship with this man. Yeah, this was all in your mind of where, you thought this was going to go. So what was a hard conversation you had to have with yourself to pull yourself really out of that deep delusion?
It wasn't about a relationship. It was about who I was as a person. It never was about a romantic relationship. Like, I lost my identity going through that. It wasn't about who I want to be with him. It's like, Lord, who am I? I don't know who I am anymore.
Wow.
I don't even know where to start. So my identity was wrapped up in this. So everything that I dreamed that I would ever do, I watched this woman do it with her husband.
Oof.
Right? It was to the point where I'm not one of those people that put themselves in spaces that they are not wanted. So I always was the one that stayed out of the way. That's me. So I remember a time watching this. You don't really want to face these people.
Yeah.
I want to come and get the word, but I don't want to be in that environment. I never forget I was holding this baby. And
His baby?
No, a baby.
Oh,
No,
a baby.
I wasn't there when they had their child.
Oh, okay.
Gone. But I was holding a baby, and she walked up behind me and started playing with the baby. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't talk about. We condemn a lot of people because of how they feel, or you feel like, well, why do you feel like that? Or she's jealous, or she's envy. It's in you. It's nothing that you can do. Like, if that's how you feel, you got to live in that until you're not in that anymore. And so at that moment, I couldn't face her. And I said, and I knew.
Because you felt like she was really living your life.
She was. In my head, yes, she was.
Wow.
And so so when people say, people have a lot of opinions about the decision, and I get it, rightfully so. But in order to really understand, like, this wasn't about a man. This was about who I was as a person. This is who I was, like, in terms of my assignment. God, what did you call me to do? God, I've uprooted my life. I've come here. I've done this. I've done that. And look at what has happened, and just trying to figure out what is it that I'm supposed to do now.
So what was that shift into?
It was a shift
into your purpose, into what you're doing now.
It was like, you get tired of being in that situation. It took some time. It was like the start of it was when I said, his daughter was born on my birthday. The pain of it all, like, unfortunately, pain is what destroys the yoke, that pain. And it was the pain of knowing, like, God is the giver of life. Nobody could have, not even them. So
when his baby was born on your birthday,
on my birthday,
that was the moment
that was
when
the
you
start.
Said, I got to start breaking this.
Yeah. It wasn't even like I made a conscious decision. It just started. Because I knew, I'm like, there's no way, like, God, this is too painful. Because when I found that out, I was in New Jersey, staying at my sister's house, sleeping on my nephew's top bunk bed. And this is someone who owned a home, who was extremely successful for her age and driving a nice car, having the latest clothes. And now I'm on a bunk bed in East Orange, New Jersey. So I'm like, this is not even my life. But even then, it still took some time because I was still in Jersey. We hadn't even gotten to North Carolina yet. But that was the start of the breaking. But it still took 2 more years, I believe, for me to finally get up out of the situation and go and create a life for yourself. And that's when I moved to Atlanta, and then the rest is history.
So after this 2-year period of this breaking, this cycle that was in your life, what was the thing that you learned? What was the shift? What was the momentum that kept you moving forward?
So I told you I'm a student of the word. That was what kept me. So I would always draw strength from the word. Like I knew God was doing something. I didn't know what he was doing, but I knew I would talk about it all the time. And I talked about my dreams and aspirations of being an author. I wanted to have this relationship platform where we have these conversations. I didn't know it would become a reality. So I just held on to my dreams and I just continued to stay under the word. And I think after a while, you just get tired of being in a certain situation. You know, I'm living in the house with my parents. I've lost everything. You know, so at the while, I was just like, I got to do something different. And so I started to work while I was in North Carolina. And then things just started slowly unraveling. And then when I got ready, when I made a decision to say, okay, I don't want to be in this situation anymore, God started giving me my stuff back.
Yeah.
It wasn't hard at all. That was the thing. I watched other people struggle who maybe experienced a bankruptcy or a repossession because my car was taken. When I went and got my car back, I was trying to get like a little special finance, I don't know, a Passat or something. I never forget niggas talking to me about special finance. And I'm like, oh God, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get a car. And so I said, well, and the car that was taken was a Lexus, but prior to that I had a Mercedes. And so I just called a dealership and was like, hey, this is my situation. You know, I want to know if you guys can help me. And so he was like, well, I'm going to need you to fill out the application. And so I did. And he called me up. He was like, when you come to get your car? I said, huh? He said, listen, you was never late with us. You ain't missed a payment. You come get your car.
Yeah.
And I went, my dad gave me the money for the down payment. So when I got ready to get up, I say all that to say, when I got ready to get up, God was like, here, your stuff back.
Yeah.
I was waiting on you. But I think it was more so about idolatry. You know, when we put our time, our talent, our energy and resources to something other than God. And the focus was a man.
You had made that your idol.
I had made that my idol.
Yeah.
And so I was being, you know, operating in disobedience. And so, you know, when you operate in disobedience, well, you're not covered in that. Or God will extend you some grace and some mercy, but I think he just allowed me to just go through it full force. You know, I talk about people who commit suicide. People say, they committed suicide, they're weak. It's nothing weak about a person who commits suicide. It takes a great deal of strength to take your own life. Like, I thought about it, but it wasn't something that I had the strength to do, you know? And so now I am the voice of the single woman. Because I know a lot of people can't empathize with that situation. They say you're delusional, you're crazy, but a lot of people go through that and they don't have any support. People are not empathetic. They don't have compassion. They talk about them. They joke about them. They mistreat them. And that's not right because it needs, you have to be able to, it has to be dealt with. You just can't leave people to themselves because that's how you do find people who end up in these crazy situations where they hurt themselves or do crazy stuff because you shun them, you didn't support them. I feel like all of this, even down to this interview today, could have been avoided. Like this would have been wrapped up years ago if a simple apology. That man, he had a right to choose what he wanted, who he wanted to choose and be with who he wanted to be with. But when you bring that into the church and you allow them to mistreat me and mishandle me.
Okay, wait, Chanel. So you feel as though you were owed an apology?
No, when I went and served in the church, I'm just serving, right? I'm not saying this man is my husband. We're talking 3 years later now. I'm here for 3 years. I was in Nashville for 4 years. So I'm in church just serving, trying to figure it out. Doing what I'm doing, not wearing this on my sleeve, not even talking. Now he's been married for 3 years. You think I'm telling people this man, I believe this? It's a private struggle for me, but this is not something that I'm openly talking about. So when I was successful on the magazine piece, the people who I work with, they was going to him saying, Chanel, she's doing this, she's doing that. They're celebrating me. That's when it came into the church. So he was like, he can't have that. I got to let them know who she is. And so that's when it came out, this is who this person is.
Wait a minute. So he tells people at the church that you were a woman that was interested in him?
Yes.
Okay.
But prior to that, what we did was outside of the church. I didn't live in Nashville. It never had to go into the church. It wasn't something that I was going to church sharing with anybody.
So did you feel like the church let you down or you felt like he let you down?
I feel like he and the church, because he sent people to talk to me. So I'm skipping parts because I didn't, I'm just going at the pace of the interview. But I was called into a meeting thinking that at the time I had just lost my car. I don't have a job. I was working on a magazine. They called me into an interview. I'm thinking, even the girl told me, she said, hey, Chanel, come down to the church. We're going through some transitions and the director of human resources wants to talk to you. I said, cool. I took 2 buses to get down to the church. I'm thinking, oh, they about to give me a job. Because at this point, that was the focal point. He brings me into a meeting and he begins to ask me about my affinity towards the pastor. Now, this is 3 years later. And I'm thinking he's going to ask me about my work. He's asking me about the pastor.
And at this point, you really had no affinity for him anymore.
It was 3 years later. Like, at this point, I'm living on that campus. I look like death. You knew something was wrong. Like, there was one gentleman, he used to always compliment me on my suits. Well, when I started going through what I was going through, he came up to me. I thought he wanted to shake my hand. I go to shake his hand. He puts money in my hand because he knew, just looking at my appearance, that something was wrong. Something wasn't right. So I'm just serving now. My private struggle is mine for me to have. But you expose me and exploit me to the people in the church. They had nothing to do with what transpired between you and I. And not to mention, you didn't even implicate yourself. You just put me out there as some crazy deranged woman that you didn't even know.
But not knowing that you all had an encounter, you stayed at his house before, you played Truth or Dare, all the things.
Right. So when the director of human resources come in, since he wanted to have the conversation, I said, let's have the conversation since you want to ask me about my personal life. And so I let him know. And so by the end of the meeting, he was like, Chanel, you a strong woman. I commend you. Like, it was nothing he could say. He said, they asked me. He let his guard down. He said, they asked me to bring you in here. And he said, I was instructed to relinquish you of your responsibilities if you said that you believe this man was your husband. And of course I told him that I didn't believe it because I'm like, this is not something that I'm wearing on my sleeve here. You guys bringing me in here, you opening up Pandora's box. I'm here serving. What I got going on is the struggle is private and it's between me and God at this point, right? I'm not dragging nobody into it. I'm not going around telling anybody, that this is what I believe, but you tell these people these things about me. You don't implicate yourself. And now I'm in a meeting with the director of human resources.
So now at this stage in relationships and how they matter in your life, what's as a single child-free woman, a woman of a certain age, what is your message to women who find themselves in places and spaces where they think that someone is their husband or they have this strong desire for marriage? What's your message to them now?
My message is this. Before you even consider wanting to be in a relationship, it is extremely important that you tap into purpose. You need to know who you are. See, when you know who you are, you don't get caught up in crazy situations like that. You don't make those types of mistakes because you're not trying to live vicariously through this illusion in your head. You living in reality and you good with you, right? You're not trying to attach your value to someone else because you see more value in them than you see in yourself. So you need to know what your God-given purpose is. You need to know what your assignment is. And you need to be good with that, solid with that. And once you are, then you can start thinking about a relationship. And then when somebody disappoints you, it's nothing for you to say, okay, you don't like me? Okay, well, I like myself. Move on to the next person.
Was there something in your childhood or some sort of trauma that you experienced as a child or a teen?
No.
That kind of made you want to kind of find some love somewhere that maybe it wasn't?
It wasn't my childhood per se. I have 2 very loving parents, but I will say this. I was 6'1" at 15.
Yeah.
So that's a lot.
Yeah.
Coming up.
Yeah.
And so quite naturally, when you're that tall, you got to grow into yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's a little awkward.
Yeah.
And so I've experienced a tremendous amount of rejection over the years. And I went from not being the one that was liked to going to college. And now I'm surrounded by 6'9", 6'6" men, and they looking at me.
Come on, college expands your horizons. You know, Chanel, you get to college and you're like, oh, these is grown bodies.
But I miss the maturation process between 15 and 18. You can't take someone who has never had any experience and then send them to the wolves in college because I don't know how to handle that attention because I never had it. You know what I'm saying? So now I get all this attention. You know, I'm the first person you see when you walk through the room. I'm feminine. I'm a tall, feminine woman. So that's another thing. Most women my height are more masculine. So the men, they were all on me. I didn't know how to handle that attention. So I made a lot of mistakes in college because I didn't know what to do. I didn't, you know what I'm saying? I went from not having it at all to having all of it and not knowing how to manage it. So quite naturally, when you're in those types of scenarios, they don't always work out in your favor. Even though you get attention, don't mean he wants you, don't mean he value you. It just means that he think you cute. That's it. And so not being prepared for those types of experiences. And then over time, it just wears on you. The rejection, you know, some of those guys I liked, you know, and when maybe they got what they wanted, then it didn't fare in my favor. Now I'm left picking up the pieces. Well, after so many years, you got to carry that, you know, and it starts to affect your relationships. It starts to affect how you engage other people. And so now I can't have a healthy relationship because I don't know how to communicate. You understand what I'm saying? So that it started there. So for me, it had nothing to do with my upbringing. It had everything to do with just you know, how
kind of
God,
battling the insecurities.
Battling insecurities and just, you know, and I experienced that from the time I was, even before I was 15, you know, it was always like, that is my struggle. It's like a tremendous amount of rejection to the point now where I'm just more closed off, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just more guarded because you don't know where a person is coming from. You don't want to open up yourself because I love hard. So if I let you in that space, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to love you. But you don't even know who you can trust now.
So what have you learned about communication? You said that communication is a factor. What have you learned about communication and how you communicate in this season of your life?
Transparency. I didn't know how to communicate before. I didn't know how to articulate. I didn't know how to use my words. You know, I didn't know how to have just normal conversation with the man because if it was just some regular person, that's different. But it's like if I liked them, it was something on the inside of me that just wouldn't allow me to be myself for fear. You don't want to mess it up. I want to go with the flow. So then you know, whenever you're not being authentic, something else.
So you were playing a part.
Yeah, just trying to play the part. And then the type of men that I dated, going to college, meeting these guys were ball players. So it went from, oh, you don't want me, so I'm gonna get somebody better than you. So I'm gonna go to the NBA. And so that's a whole nother world. You know what I'm saying? That you encounter and whole nother experiences that you go through. And so that was my life. And so just trying to navigate that. And then I'm not cut out for that, right? I was always the one that I was trying to be a part of something that I wasn't. It really wasn't who I was, but I was trying to fit in, you know, trying to fit into a lifestyle, trying to be this, trying to be what I thought a man wanted, you know, rather than just being myself. And so it took me years to finally figure out who I was as a woman, as a person, as a woman of God, like what my identity was, see myself how God sees me, right? I would see myself the way other people saw me. And I would move on that. And that wasn't who I was, you know, and then it would affect my self-esteem, you know, because it wasn't always positive how other people saw me. You know, there were times where I didn't like myself, you know, and so once I got good with who Chanel is, then everything else became easy for me.
Yeah. Where you are right now, what is your message to women outside of purpose? Once they find their purpose, then what's the next thing that they need to do
You need to vet situation. So this is the thing.
You need to vet.
So often we know this person is not a good fit for us, but he's fine. No, you need to get to know this person's character. Does he have integrity?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Does he love his mama? You know, how does he treat other people? That's important. And that's not something that I did. For me, it would be like, oh, he's the popular one. Okay, I'm going to be with him. He can have a horrible character. He could be a horrible person. But that's who I'm going to be with. Because I was living vicariously through that because of the rejection. I had to get the next best thing so people could see me as this, right? So once you get good on who you are, you don't do that anymore.
So your value isn't connected to what he does or who he is.
Exactly. So when you tap into, it goes back to purpose. When you tap into purpose, then you have your own identity. And you're happy with that.
Yeah.
You don't have to attach your value to someone else, and because that's what happens is you attach your value to someone else, and you think they're more valuable than you. So then next thing you know, you're allowing them to mistreat you, you're allowing them to mishandle you, you're tolerating things that you shouldn't be tolerating because you see more value on him than you see on yourself. But when you start valuing yourself, the moment a situation doesn't look right, you're like, okay, I'm gone.
I'm out.
I'm out.
Yeah.
And that was difficult for me to do, because I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be able to meet someone else. Like most women, they get into a situation when they're young, they can't see past that. They see that person and they think they're not going to meet anybody else that's better than. And every single time, did you meet someone that was better? Yes, you did. And so then also I advocate for self-love, because when you ask someone, do you love yourself? Everybody in this room would instinctively say, yes, I do. But then you have to look at your decisions. How do you allow that person to treat you? Do you allow that person to disrespect you? Do you allow that person to mishandle you? Because if you do, you don't love yourself.
Yeah.
Would you allow someone, if you really loved yourself, would you allow someone to treat you that way? And the answer is no. And so for years, I didn't love myself. I didn't even know I didn't love myself.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Because it's like, how do you practically love yourself? Like people say, you got to learn how to love yourself, but you don't hear anybody teaching you how to do that. And the way to do that is find out who you are and be okay with that, instead of trying to find it outside of yourself and attaching your value to another human being who is just as flawed as you are.
Absolutely.
So that's my message.
Do you find it challenging in the relationship space to have conversations and be an authority and be the queen of as a single child-free woman?
No. I'm a boss. Yeah. No, I write the checks. So I have no issue communicating what it is that I want and what it is that I don't want. I have no problem with it. And I know how to do it and extend grace at the same time. I'm not saying it's easy, but I know how to do that.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's harder because you are single and child-free that people are responsive or receptive to the knowledge that you have?
No. Because I'm relatable.
Yeah.
See, when I walk into the room, you think one thing. You look at me, you automatically size me up, and you say, she might be a little bougie, she might be this, she might be that. People don't define me based on what happened in my life 17 years ago.
Yeah.
God has made me a completely new, different person. Like, I'm telling this story to reach out to women who may be experiencing that now, but I don't live in that.
Yeah.
I don't walk in it. It's not a part of my life at all.
Yeah.
Like, I'll take these few minutes to have a conversation about it, but when I walk out of here, that is not my life.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So no, it's not. It's almost as if it didn't even happen for me. People respect me. So they listen to what I say, and most importantly, I am relatable because I don't mind being transparent. When I sit down, I'm not going to ask you anything that I wouldn't answer for myself. So when I do my CheMinistry mainly, I start out about my own experiences to kind of let you, help people get more comfortable with the conversation. So I'm not asking you something that I've never been through, and I'm not asking you to share something that I'm not willing to share. And so people are always taken aback by that when I say, well, yeah, I went through that. Are these my experiences? I mean, I've written a book. I've written 2 books. I read the one book. I kind of detailed the situation with Nashville. And then my second book, I pick out some of my most traumatic experiences in terms of relationships, and then I speak to that and give practical principles on how not to make the same mistakes as I've made. So I'm very transparent about my life experiences, but no, I don't walk in the foolishness.
So what would be the thing that you would tell the women that you did to recover yourself from the situation in Nashville?
Once I got to, there was no one place I needed to be. I mean, I had lost everything in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I literally had to start over. And so I always wanted to come to Atlanta. And so I said, you know what? I had some family here. I'm going to go and start over. I was already working on CheMinistry, and it just happened organically. I didn't come here with that idea. It was something in my heart that I always wanted to do, and it wasn't named CheMinistry. It was just something I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then God just put me in the right place and put me around the right people that could help me get my ideas off the ground, and it just went from there. My whole stay, I've been here for 9 years. My whole stay here has been purposeful. I worked in the corporate for 6 years. I'm a owner of it's a tech startup, but it's a gaming software.
Yeah.
Changed my life.
This was in 2020.
This
you
was
got
in
introduced
2021.
to, okay,
Yeah,
that
2021.
you got introduced.
Yes, changed my life. And
Can you say the gaming software or no?
no,
Okay.
yeah. No,
Okay.
that's not something that I openly share. Now, if they want, they can check with me offline. That's
can
not something I
send
want
her a DM.
advertised all over it. Yeah, you can check with me personally. But yeah, I own a gaming software. My sister-in-law introduced me to it. It was a business she was in, and I was talking to my dad, and I just got this new job at Chase as a private client banker. And I'm telling my dad about this job, and he was saying, no, I was telling him my clients they have no less than 150K because I thought that was a lot of money at the time. And he was like, "That sounds like your brother." And I didn't even entertain the conversation because I'm like, my dad, he don't know what he's talking about. And so during my little 2-week time off between one job and starting the next job, I was just sitting around and saw some stuff on Facebook because, during COVID, people was doing all types of things. And I screenshot what I thought maybe my dad was talking about, and I sent it to my brother. And I'm like, Dad said that this is, just outline what my dad had said. And I said, "Is this what y'all doing?" And he was like, "No." And then he started telling me what it was that they did. And then he said, "Can I call you?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I'm your sister. Of course you can call me." And so he called me up and he shared with me what it was. And I said, "I'm coming home this weekend and you guys are going to show me what you're doing." And I went home, and my sister-in-law, I sat with her and she gave me the fundamentals of how to get started, how to get my customers, because you have to have customers in order to get the software. And so I did that. And at the time, I guess the timing couldn't have been more perfect because I was starting a new job. So I wasn't actively, even when I started, I was in the office training. So I was obsessive with trying to do what I needed to do to get customers. And I was able to walk away from Chase in 6 weeks.
Oh, wow. So is this like a pyramid marketing type of
No,
endeavor?
it's a software.
Okay.
I own I lease a software.
Okay,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. I'll tell you about it afterwards.
And so other people can get involved in this?
Yeah, other people could get involved. So this is the thing. When we first started, I trained a lot of people. It requires a type of grit that a lot of people don't have, and patience. Now that we're back outside, it's not as easy, but if you're determined to get it, you can. I personally don't train other people on it because it just takes too much time. It's not a situation where we can talk about it one time and then you got it.
You need a commitment.
I got to be engulfed. You're going to call me every day because that's what I did to my sister-in-law. I still call it to this day. It's been 3 years. So, so it's literally a gaming software. I'll say this. It's gaming. So it's a gaming software that you could probably go and play in a physical location, but I lease it and I have virtual players. And because the grace of God, I got to say that first, and then marketing, going to these different social media platforms, doing the marketing, positioning, people gave me a chance, and once they play with me and find out, okay, this is legitimate, this is real, word of mouth, 3 years later, I have over 5,000 people that do business with me.
You. That's awesome. What I'm hearing in your story is that you were not afraid to start over.
No, I had no choice.
Yeah.
I had no choice. It was either be nothing or go and try it again. Because I was nothing. I lost everything. I hit rock bottom. I didn't even have clothes. Because remember, I left all my clothes with Jasmine.
Yeah.
So my mom, she would buy me things when we had things to do. But I didn't have a life. I tell people, for 8 years, I didn't live. For 8 years, my life, literally, it was like hitting the pause button. And it wasn't until I decided that I want to play again that it was like, okay, I want to get back in the game now, God.
Yeah.
And so once I got here, and within 2 months, I started CheMinistry, that gave me the drive and the motivation to keep pushing. And every time I did an event, it got bigger and bigger. I always had the resources. God always made a way, regardless of whether I didn't have it before, but when it was time to have it, I had what I needed. Even my show that was on Fox Soul, when I pitched it in 2020, I was still working at the bank. I didn't know how production worked. I didn't understand that you got to produce it and submit a finished product. If they had given me the opportunity, I would not have had the money to do it. It was 2 years later, they called me and was like, "Are you still doing a show?" And I said, "I absolutely am." And I flew in the GM to Charlotte because I was doing it in Charlotte. And he wanted to do a pilot. And it was the perfect time because I'm like, I have the money.
Yeah.
I can produce. I can produce as much as you want. So it was all about divine timing and then just getting into purpose and doing what God has called me to do. And I know people say, you know, how can you be a relationship? Because I've had those experiences. Like for me, it's very difficult for me to receive from someone who go to bed every night with a warm body. It ain't a whole lot you can say to me. Like, it's like maybe when I was in my 30s, the women in church would say, oh, you got the rest of your life to get a husband or a man. And that was cute then. But at 50, that ain't gonna cut it. So I want to hear from people who have similar experiences, who can empathize and who know what it is to be in certain scenarios like I have. Now, if you can speak to that and you've had that experience, then I can hear from you all day long. But if you ain't never had your heart broke, if you ain't never been taken down through there, rejected, mishandled, mistreated, then what you gonna tell me?
Yeah.
You can't empathize. So if you've never had a situation where you like someone, they didn't like you back. If you've always been the popular one who got the guy, then how can you give me advice? You can't. You can only tell me what you think I should do, but is it really going to help and be impactful? So I believe that God has taken my life and he's used it as a training ground. So what I do is when I go on my platforms, I talk about the mistakes that I've made. I talk about how I navigated through them so that they don't have to go through what I went through. So if I can prevent you from having to go through that, then I've done my job. If I've helped just one person not make the same mistakes that I made, you know what I'm saying, then I've done my job. Like I didn't get to be 50, and I don't mind saying that, 50, no children, never married, to just not tell, not say what the experiences were, not tell people my testimony about how I had nothing. And I did go to Nashville and I did believe this man was my husband. But look at my life now. And I have no problem. I have no shame because I'm extremely blessed. And it's an unusual blessing. It's unusual how God did it.
Yeah.
So I have to tell people. So you can't shame me because look at my life. What are you going to say?
So what's on the horizon for you?
So right now we do our show Relationships Matter. I just released a relationship card game, and it's a 2-deck card game where one deck deals with conversation starters on sex and relationships for couples, and then the other one is the healing journey, navigating past pain and trauma. And my favorite, obviously, navigating past pain and trauma, because it helps couples. Especially, it helps existing couples, but it also helps new couples ask those uncomfortable questions.
Give me an example of one of the questions.
Like, for instance, like what we're doing now. If it was a man and we were in a relationship, then you would want to know a little bit about my past, a little bit about my experiences. Well, it creates a non-intrusive way to ask those questions without sounding like you're being judgmental, but we both got to share. Like I'll ask you a question and then I'll ask a question, I'll answer it, you'll answer it. And then you get to learn about your partner. And then you also get to learn how to support them. And then, for instance, if you're triggered, like I still have triggers, like there's still certain things that trigger me. I'm human. And so now, because you are familiar with some of my experiences, you know how to support me better.
Yeah.
You're not blindsided. You're like, dang, I didn't know about that, because we've talked about it. And then in terms of the sex, even though I'm not out there, not right now.
You said you were abstinent for 8 years, and now you've been abstinent for the last 4 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with the sex, there are a lot of times we get into these situations and we don't ask the right questions. And then I hear women talk about, he's stepping out on me, or they're cheating on me. And that's because you didn't have the conversation before you got married. You got married and you didn't get solid on if this person was even compatible with you, or if you were into what they were into, or if they were into what you're into. So if a person is not willing to learn, if they're not into, then that's a red flag.
Yeah.
That might not be your person. You don't want to get into these situations and you find out we don't have nothing in common because you're so enamored, or we operate in lust, and we that whole feeling of the newness of a relationship. And so it helps to ask those questions. They're like, it provokes you to think through your responses and then think about your partner's responses, and then you say, do we need to continue this, or do we need to stop right here?
Yeah.
But it's a non-intrusive way of doing that, because a lot of times when people bombard you with a lot of questions when it's new, you're like, why are you asking me so many questions? You get a little offended. But it's a game and we're both sharing. Then we can both learn about one another in a way that's non-threatening.
Learning about one another in a way that's not threatening. As we begin to close out this interview, one word you're committed to in this season of your life.
One word that I'm committed to. I am intentional. I'm intentional about my business. I'm intentional about my relationships. I am intentional. I'm in a space in my life where I never really, even women, never even considered, is this a good fit for me? And I'm in a space where I'm asking myself, do I want to invite this into my life?
Even female relationships.
Even females,
Female
because I have found that since I've been in Atlanta, it's very difficult to, especially when you're in the industry. And when I was in corporate, you work with people, you build relationships there. But I haven't been in 3 years. So it's like, it's very difficult to meet friends, and you meet different people. And then I'm secure in what I'm doing. You know, you could be doing better than me. That's great. I'm going to glean from you because I want to know what you're doing to be successful, and vice versa. You know, where you connect with different women and then it becomes a competition. I don't like that. Like, but I'm good at my purpose. And if you were good, we could just vibe and learn and glean and uplift each other. But when you don't know who you are and then you're looking at me and you look, you know, then it doesn't work. So I vet my relationships. I ask myself, do you want to invite this into your space? Because I try to create a space of peace. It's not always perfect, but I try to be more intentional about who I allow in my space. And, you know, I want them to do the same. I encourage them to do the same, you know? So just being more intentional about the relationships that I engage in, for sure.
Yeah, being intentional.
Yeah.
Last thing you will leave our audience with, to women who find themselves, they are single, they are child-free, or they are just not in relationship right now, but they desire that. What's the one thing you would tell them?
I told you, focus on your purpose. Like because that's the thing, if you focus and align yourself on purpose, then you align with like-minded people. You don't know who you're going to come in contact with. While you're operating in this space, you're going to meet different people. And you never know who you meet or who you come in contact with, types of conversations that you have. So if you just focus on that, you will find your tribe.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So don't focus so much on trying to make it happen, putting yourself in places that aren't even comfortable to you. Like some people say, well, I'm not going to no bar to meet no man. Because that's not even comfortable. I don't even drink. So what am I sitting at a bar for?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I do the things that I like to do. And, you know, prayerfully in those moments when I'm doing it, then I come in contact with like-minded people who have similar goals, similar values, and we can move. And, you know, we might have a conversation by default. I didn't even see you as someone attractive. You may not have seen me, but through conversation, I'm like, person is intriguing.
Yeah.
You know, and then it go from there. So
Chanel Nicole Scott, thank you so much for spending your time with me. Find your purpose, walk in intention, and those people will come to you.
They will come to you.
Thank you so much. Vault Empowers Talks, another good one for the books. Be sure to share this with someone who needs a little more intention and needs to be guided into a purpose-driven life. Until next time, I'm your girl, Brandi Harvey. Eat well, give a damn, move your body every single day. Peace.